Summer 2019, and Fender has launched a new line of electric guitars called the Vintera series. So the questions are, why? What's it for? Who's it for? Should you get one? Check it out. Hello everyone out there on the internet. This is Christopher McKee with Alamo Music Center in beautiful San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. Today we're going to look at the new series from Fender, the Vintera series. So it launches right now, summer of 2019, just ahead of the Summer NAMM show. How do you like that? And we have thankfully gotten 2 examples to show you. More of these will be coming in. But before we get into the specifics of each of these guitars and what you can expect, Vintera, why? What is it? Who's it for? So let's break that down for you. Vintera effectively replaces the Classic series and the Classic Deluxe series, basically the vintage styled instruments that were made in Mexico have been replaced by this new line of guitars. So that series has been around for a long time. It was really popular and there were a lot of cool instruments in it. However, I will say that over time, that collection, that series of guitars grew and kind of got complicated and difficult to follow. You had classic design, you had deluxe models, you had lacquer versions, you had custom shop specific versions like the Baja, which was a very, very cool guitar. So all of those have been replaced by this new series of guitars. So they are made in Mexico models that are vintage spec guitars, as well as vintage modified, but not to be confused with the vintage modified series. So they're vintage era, and they have normal kind of classic versions of those, and then modified versions of those, at least for the most part. And what Fender's done, why would they do this? So one is to kind of take a look at that line, what they were trying to do with it, and improve upon it. And they've done so in a great way. So they've taken a look and they've gone by era. These eras that defined these guitars that we love and that have influenced music for decades. And specifically, we're looking at the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. In the Vintera line, which stands for Vintage Era Instruments, in the Vintera line, you're going to have 50s Strats and Telecasters, 60s Strats and Telecasters, along with Jaguars and Jazzmasters and Mustangs, and 70s instruments as well, which include a cool big headstock, 70s Strat with the 3-point plate on the back of the headstock, cool Telecaster customs and deluxe models with some amazing colors, wide range humbucking pickups, and a really cool 70s vibe. And it's neat that Fender's done this because the 70s have really come back and they have something to offer on their own, in addition to the standard 50s and 60s era that we typically look back to. So in going back to these guitars, these eras really, in this line, Fender wanted to make them more vintage accurate when it came to specs than the outgoing Classic series. So what that means is that things in like the 50s, you're going to see 4-mar wiring, Alnico 2 and 3 magnets in the Telecaster, Alnico 5s in the Stratocaster, again with 4-mar wiring, and the traditional vintage spec hardware, colors, a lot of new colors, and the radius of the fingerboard. So on the more vintage accurate instruments, you're going to have a 7¼ inch radius fingerboard. As you move into the 60s, the pickups change with the stagger, the magnets, and the wiring. So it goes from formvar to enamel. The stagger of the pickups changes. They go from having beveled magnets to having flat top magnets, just like we saw in the 60s. The hardware changes, the colors change, all of the designs change. And then same thing with the 70s, where we see flat, no stagger on the pickups whatsoever. We go to polysol coated wiring, the same hardware with the 3-point neck plate instead of the 4-point neck plate, and the adjustment, the micro tilt adjustment, and so forth. So that's kind of in the vintage era specific ones. And then there's a modified version of each one, and that changes the hardware. So we'll show you that on the Strat here in a little bit. It changes the radius from a 7 1/4 to 9.5 inch radius, and we'll talk about why that's important. And you know, colors to suit each one. So that in a nutshell is what's going on in the series. This series from Fender probably has the most models and the most colors to choose from. And where you could become, you know, kind of confused is if you're not sure what you're wanting. So let's talk a little bit about why you should choose kind of a 60s or 50s or 70s versus a modified version. If you want a guitar in this price range, which is going to be around or just under $1,000. So think of it as slotting above the Player series, but beneath the Performer series. That's kind of where this line sits. So you're wanting a vintage era instrument, something just like your hero played, that's just like what came out, as close as can be from a Made in Mexico guitar. Then you're going to want just the normal 50s, 60s, 70s spec instrument. If you're wanting something that is looking like that and really kind of sounds like that but plays in a more modern sense, then you want to get the modified. And the modified is going to have the same era-specific and correct magnets in the pickups, but they're overwound, so they're a little bit hotter. You're going to have more modern hardware, like locking tuners, 2-point tremolo systems, things like that, and you're going to have some switching capabilities like we saw in the Baja before. Like for instance, the 50s modified Telecaster effectively replaces that and still has the switching capability, as does the 60 Strat that we're going to look at. From a playability standpoint, something that's like a 7 1/4 radius like this Telecaster is extremely comfortable when you're chording all over the neck. Think of Hendrix style, doing rhythm and lead at the same time. But if you bend above, say, about a tone and a half, then you might run into the notes choking out, which is, you know, something that vintage radiuses sometimes deal with depending upon the setup of the guitar. But you're likely to bend and kind of hit the arc of the fret wire as you bend up. So if you play that style, then you are probably going to lean more toward the modified version of the guitar where it has the flatter radius and the switching capabilities and all of that stuff. So in a nutshell, that is the Vintera series. Today, here's what we have to show you. This very cool 60s Telecaster and a 60s Stratocaster modified. This 60s is probably one of my favorite in the lineup. So enamel wiring, Alamo 5 pickups, your typical 3-way tone, volume, right, and it's a 7 1/4 radius. It's glossed on the back of the neck. The modifieds have a satin finish on the back of the neck. And a Bigsby, which is totally cool. Something that a lot of people would do on their own, kind of with a modification. This is coming with an actual Bigsby, because Fender now owns Bigsby, if you missed that headline. So they're including it on this guitar. This comes in a number of finishes, but this kind of white blonde, which is transparent, allows you to see the body, you know, the figuring in the wood, happens to be my favorite of the 3 that are available. The other one we're going to look at is this. This is a 60s Stratocaster in Olympic white with the Pal-Faro fingerboard. It is going to have your traditional 60s Alamo 5 staggered flat pole pieces with the 5-way switching setup just like you would expect on a Strat. However, since it's modified, it's 9 1/2 inch radius, it's 2-point synchronized tremolo, and it has an S1 switch in the volume, which adds the neck pickup in either the first or second position, so you can have either all 3 pickups on or that neck and bridge kind of like in a Telecaster middle position. So very cool guitars. This one, of course, has satin on the back of the neck, like I mentioned, and that flatter radius. So we're going to put these through their paces so you can hear an example of what's coming out of these new Vint era guitars from Fender. And as promised, we'll be doing the reviews of all the others as they trickle in from the Fender factory. So check it out. All right, so Vintera 60s Telecaster with Bigsby, 3-way, bridge, both, neck. We'll just go through with the volume up, give you clean, and give you dirty. Okay, so this is the Vintera 60s era modified Stratocaster in Olympic white. It's going to have your normal 3 single coil pickups. There's plenty of hum, they're not noise canceling. You have a 5-way switch, but you also have the S1 switch, which will add the neck pickup in the first and second position to either give you neck and bridge or all 3 pickups at once. Here we go. So there you have it. New for 2019, releasing this summer, is the Fender Vintera line. We have these coming in all of the various models, different colors, so make sure to check them out on our website. Just go to alamomusic.com and you can see them there. You can also just click on the link in the description below, and that will take you to the entire selection of Vintera guitars. So very cool. I think they are a huge improvement. I'm excited. I'm also curious to know which ones you're most excited about. So as we get them in, we will be doing full reviews of each and every model. Make sure you stay tuned. The best way to do that, if you're new around here, is to go ahead and hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. That way you know when we know, you'll know. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.